Environmental Action Committee as a subcommittee of the Fayetteville City Council, and it is November 10th, 2011. And why don't we go around the table and say our names for the camera. Start here.
Meredith Lewis,
Terry Lane,
Connie Crisp,
Angie Albright,
Richard Russell,
Susan Gouillet.
Okay, and our chair, Sarah Lewis, is out of town this week, so we are going to proceed without her. So, and I think you're a new member, right?
I was new last week.
Last week. I didn't meet you, so.
I wasn't here last time.
Okay, well, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think the main thing on the agenda is we're going to have Chris Brown talking about the update on the drainage criteria manual and the low impact development tech manual and where we are with that. So, are you Chris?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm Chris Brown. I'm the city engineer, and we're handling the drainage criteria manual project.
Do you want to come and sit up here so we can have you on camera?
Certainly.
no, Aubrey's
Love-
period to hear this. He was,
And who's the
Oh,
one?
yeah, that's right.
And I had been
Come
reading
on.
about this, so
I
I
don't
don't
have it on YouTube tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I don't know how familiar you all are with the project, but the city has a drainage criteria manual, which is basically the manual for how drainage systems have to be designed as development occurs, what the design storms are, and detention requirements and all that sort of thing. So it hasn't been updated since the mid-90s, and so we're doing a major update of that. Along with that, we're looking at an additional chapter which will be for low impact development. We have a low impact development manual that's been developed by I guess it's a community design center. Y'all are probably familiar with that.
Steve Maloney in that group.
Right. This manual will actually be the technical side of that. That manual kind of shows you some of the things you might be able to do. The LID chapter that we're looking at will be the technical piece of that, how you design it, what benefits you get from it, and so that's what this chapter will be, and they will kind of fit together. So we have a consultant team on board to do this design or to do this manual, and we've had the kickoff meeting. I guess it's been a couple of weeks now. We've also had a stakeholder meeting with some of the users of the design manual, design engineers, essentially that do development work in the city. And so now the consultant team is moving forward with developing kind of that framework and outline of the manual, and the LID chapter is kind of a first step. They will deliver the LID chapter sometime in mid-December. I think December 19th is their actual deadline date. So we should see the first draft of the LID chapter then. We'll have a review process, and then in February have an almost completed LID chapter that can then be used for projects. The rest of the drainage criteria manual will take probably most of 2012 to complete. But once it's done, we'll really have a well-integrated drainage manual that's updated to a lot of the new stormwater methods that are out there, and that will be fully integrated with our LID ordinance and all of the LID elements that are out there. So,
What are some of the keystone changes, just as an example, updated? What's it like?
Yeah, well, there really are. There are several different types of changes. One of the things that's just kind of a hard engineering type thing is back when the manual was developed in the mid-90s, there were nowhere near the number of computer models for drainage design out there, and so our manual doesn't really address that very well. It's got a bunch of charts that nobody ever looks at anymore, so we'll be able to just get rid of those, throw those away. So really kind of getting with the times is a big piece of it. But some of the other things that I think are really exciting are the LID elements, what we call LID. It's kind of been, you can use this method, which is traditional storm drainage methods, or you can do LID. Well, they're really not mutually exclusive, they're not the same. They really need to be integrated together. And so, just something as simple as, and the consultant has talked about this, the city's landscaping requirements and the green space requirements and all of that, really, engineers and developers have not really been able to fully model the benefit of those. And so they don't really maybe get credit for some things that they're already doing. You know, adding trees is an LID, it has an LID benefit. So I think it's gonna help really more truly model what everyone is doing. And again, it's not either this or that, but it's a whole range of things that you can do. And it's really just kind of a fundamental shift of the way we do things now. What will end up happening is we will have whatever elements, the green elements, the LID pieces, will then reduce some of the curb numbers and some of the runoff requirements. And so you kind of look at that piece of it, and then you do the traditional, just move into the traditional design. So it's really going to integrate all of those things.
Who's the consultant for who's doing the consulting?
It's a team. It's AMEC out of
Raleigh.
Raleigh.
They're the lead national.
Right, they're the lead consultant. The Low Impact Design Center. They
It's
have,
out of Maryland, and they're one of the leading consulting groups on LID, so that's.
they have a really pretty small part in that, but and then we have local consultants, FTN Associates and EB Landworks. So it's a really good team.
It's a good question though, because it's a pretty good team. I mean, a good group of consultants that come together. So having AMEC, I mean, they've done a lot in a lot of different cities, but it's always nice to have that local too that we're familiar with. And FTN's done a lot of work here.
The lead consultant for AMEC is actually in Nashville, and they're working on an update for the Nashville manual. And so a lot of the things that they're looking at for Nashville, they're also looking at here. And again, it really seems, I think, is going to be a good fit for the way we do things, and just to be able to pull all that together. So far, I'm really encouraged that we're going to have a very good manual when we're all done.
Well, and I didn't properly introduce you. What is your role with the drainage manual with the city?
Well, I'm the city engineer, so our division does all the development reviews for drainage. So we use that manual. That's one of our regulatory tools, essentially.
I should have introduced you that way, sorry.
Quite all right, no problem. So we use that, and all the development engineers who are designing developments and designing drainage systems use that manual as well.
Aubrey, was there a specific development that brought this question up for you or something? What was in your email? It was
Campus Crest Apartments at the
And
National Cemetery.
what was the concern? I'm just not familiar.
Oh,
with.
okay. Well, of course, it's next to the National Cemetery, and which is a national shrine. It's one of the top ranked national cemeteries.
You said this is Campus Crest
apartment
development or something?
Yeah, they're calling it
Okay.
the Groves, and I'm not sure why. We didn't know why Hill Place was called Hill Place, because it's next to Hill Avenue, but I'm sorry, it was low woodland and prairie land. So the hill was further up toward the campus. But anyway, the Grove doesn't have many trees, but and they are leaving one big tree right next to the cemetery entrance. Where you've been to for instance, to Memorial Day or one of the days over there, you know that currently there's a lot of space that belongs to the Fayetteville property, the Washington County livestock auction, for instance, is used for parking for the Veterans Cemetery and so forth. And 2 years ago, you may remember, there was quite an effort to prevent this, and this time there was very little effort. But because everything could be said, had been said, and the cemetery organization has not raised enough money to buy the property during that time. And it flew through the planning commission and so forth, and through the city council approval of rezoning that will allow it. So those will be up to 4 stories, and it will be very close to the eastern edge of the street. And of course, that's where the cemetery would supposedly be expected to expand in the future. It's expanding by taking lots at the price of money raised locally by the RNCIC, Regional National Cemetery Improvement Corporation. So there's no federal money spent on expanding the cemetery. And has not been since 1984. There's this organization raising money for that purpose. But anyway, the project has been discussed most by a few of the residents of the area. I don't know if you had a visit from a couple of people maybe on the subject who live over there. And it's uncertain what stormwater effects will be from that project. And it's of concern to people who live south of there, because there is a little flow area that goes between Dunn Avenue and West Avenue. It's through their backyards. It's not designated a stream, of course, and it's never been turned into a big ditch. Where it leaves the 11th Street at the sale part of the property, it looks like a real stream in the woods there. Possibly that is exactly where the stream was. Considering the cemetery was built and first opened in 1867, it could have been ditched out way back before the subdivision was built. But down the block further down to the south, the water spreads across the backyards, which is a very natural thing, and they're accustomed to that. But as in all neighborhoods, they're not all happy that it soaks into their yard. Not everybody recognizes this is a natural wetland process. So they're concerned that some of the houses or their outbuildings will be flooded from runoff in that direction. Bulk of the water, I believe, will go to the north and east side. Tanglewood Branch is a stream that will collect that water. Currently, if you were out there 2 days ago when we had the heavy rain, I didn't see much runoff from that kind of land. And I think this is the problem for planners and engineers, is that they don't have a formula for runoff estimation that includes zero to start with. And when you've got vegetated, deep absorbent soil, relatively flat area near the stream, it's clearly wetland by the plants that are there and by the historic use that's been a pasture forever for the sale barn property, temporary pasture since 1937, just when they had cattle there a few days a week. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Anyway, I'm a little slow on this, but summarizing it is not all that easy. But the ability to predict what increase in stormwater will actually occur is strictly based on formulas that you guys have, formulas for estimating. Put in this much root and this much pavement is going to increase a certain amount. But it's got to increase quite a bit. And that, of course, that water going to the east will be in the stream that's borders Walker Park and includes from just past where 9th Street would cross if it existed, where Tanglewood Branch comes down, really in the south here. Tanglewood Branch comes down off the mountain over here, Mount Sequoia, and through the valley there, and drifts into across south of here, and it enters Walker Park on 7th Street, just one block from the school that was closed, Jefferson School, one block west of there on 7th, and then it goes around the edge of the park, just south of there. It cuts through part of the park. The water from here, from this street, goes that way. Water from Dixon Street. Water from most of the school grounds at Washington School leaves there and goes down by the library, Spring Street, just the other side of the library where the trail is, and cuts across Martin Luther King, and then goes through a large culvert after it's past the National Cemetery corner and the sale barn property that's going to be these apartments. So there is a major stream confluence down there. After looking at it today, I was where the two come together, looking at, I didn't remember just which one was dominant, but when you're downstream from there, between Walker Park and the lot that's, well, you know where the Brick House restaurant is, straight across the street there, just slightly upstream, about 100 feet, 200 feet. Two streams come together, and we're going this way again. Inside of it, it's hard to remember, but anyway, the Tanglewood branch, which is the one that comes this way, is the larger, and its actual channel is the main one. The spout spring comes in a little higher than the flood hill. If you're down there, it looks just like you're on the Buffalo River. I could, instead of posting that picture that it's inside Fayetteville on those two streams, I could pretend I was at the Buffalo River or Big Piney or some other confluence in the Ozarks. And you have to remember, this is a headwaters area very much like the parts we worship so much and have protected. And it's now an urban area, and you can't protect it in the same way. But with LID methods, it's possible to prevent some of the stream erosion that's going to continue.
So at what stage of development is the apartment complex?
It's not started.
It's not
started. The approval process.
I think that was the question for Chris. That was the second part. Was Chris kind of update on where that is and kind of the drainage design and some of those components. Another question I would ask too is I was thinking in the drainage, not the drainage manual, but the geosyntac report that was done. I thought the sale barn was identified as one of the higher phos producers, so pollutant producers in the stream corridor. So I'm kind of wondering, is there a way to do kind of comparison between what was there before and not exactly, it wasn't like it was in, you know, open forest and you had a lot of pollutants coming out of that property versus what's going on now.
Sure.
So if you could kind of address that.
Okay.
That was part 2 of Chris' presentation.
Okay, good segue then.
Yeah, well, first of all, with the drainage design, like Aubrey said, the flow kind of splits. Some of the water goes kind of past the cemetery and through the cemetery. We do have a drainage problem. There's one property owner that has got some drainage issues, so we're trying to work with him and the developer to make some improvements to that spot. In general, what's required of a development is they can't increase the peak flow after they develop beyond what it was before they developed. Now, peak flow means the amount of water that's running past a point at any one time. So most of the time they do that, they keep the peak flow down by using detention. they hold the water in place, release it more slowly. So you do have more water, more volume of water, but it's reduced, it's released more slowly, so you don't have any more flow. You know, I kind of liken it to a bathtub. If you have a hole in the bottom of the bathtub, if you have more, you dump more water into it, you dump more water into it quicker, then the bathtub has to fill up before it can finally drain out the bottom. And that's essentially what a detention pond is. It has a limited pipe size that's coming out of it, and it has to be large enough to be able to contain all the volume of the water that comes into it, so that it can then be released more slowly. That's kind of the traditional standard method of detention. LID kind of goes beyond that and tries to do something with the bottom of the pond. So instead of all the water just coming in and then going back out, some of it actually may soak into the bottom or other things. Really, the general concept of LID is to try to keep at least some of the water that falls on site where it was originally. Obviously, we don't have the new requirements in place, and so we're using the old drainage manual. However, the developer is proposing an underground detention system that consists of some pipes that have open bottoms with gravel in the bottom of it. So the water will flow through these pipes into the gravel, and we will get some infiltration benefit out of that. So they don't have to do that. That's not required, but it is something that they're doing. So we don't really have any way of modeling that to determine what the change and what the reduction in runoff is or anything like that. Again, because we just don't have the drainage criteria manual that updates that. But that is going to benefit the storm drain system a little bit. And then the majority of the water goes through the detention system and then into the creek. We do have what's called a level spreader, which is essentially a levee in front of the pipes that outfall, so the water will go over into the creek in a sheet flow as opposed to a point flow that causes erosion. So that's really what the developer is proposing. And again, the basic concept is we do not allow the peak flow to be higher after developed.
How do they determine where to test the peak flow? Like for any given development, where is the peak?
It's off-site. I mean, it's off their site. So
a stream nearby, you mean? Like what it would go into, or?
Well, I mean, normally when you have and similar in this case, they have a point where all of their drainage comes to a single spot, the lowest part of the property.
Okay.
So at that point, that's where we measure the peak flow now,
Oh, okay.
or we calculate the peak flow based on formulas, like as Aubrey said. And then compare that to the peak flow that they're
Right.
proposing, and then they have to design a detention pond to mitigate that and keep those numbers the same. So it's always where it goes off the property. In this case, it flows directly into a stream, but it doesn't always do that. It may go into some other system or whatever. So that's really what we're reviewing right now, and we're kind of working with the developer to finalize those designs so they can move forward to construction.
And who's the developer?
Well, it's Campus Crest. That's the name
Just
of the
themselves?
company. Yeah.
Oh, that's their own name? Oh.
Right. And they actually have a development company.
Oh.
So they have representatives. Morrison Shipley Engineers is their design engineer. They're a Fayetteville firm, so they're local. We've worked with them, and I think they do a good job and try to do the right thing. So that's kind of where we're at. And to your point about the environmental side, obviously with cattle producing manure, that's a phosphorus load. So it was looked at in the nutrient reduction plan, which was finished by Geosyntec in 2006. Is that right? I don't remember if they came up with numbers of phosphorus
Specific
being
to the
produced
site.
from that side or not.
Sure.
But we could probably look at that, and I'm sure we could.
I just remember it being a potential project, but then when it closed,
Right. Yeah, we were looking at some holding ponds or something to try to keep that filtration systems or whatever.
so I was just curious. Yeah, I don't know if there are numbers, but it'd be interesting to how that compares to, you're gonna have parking runoff and all of the impervious surface that is added from rooftops and that type of thing. So what kind of pollution loads compared to what was there before? It's just a question. the interesting thing about LID too is that, you know, I mean, there are kind of two conversations. You've got the flows that contribute to flooding, which the traditional engineering in the past has always addressed, but the LID also kind of takes into the water quality component. So the FOSS issues and all those things, you get a certain level of treatment that comes out of the natural vegetation. So it's kind of two different things. Right now, with the drainage design, it's all about flood control and flood management, which, I mean, we've looked at even in the spring, the GIS maps that were produced after the heavy storms. You could tell a stark difference between West Fayetteville and the newer developments that have occurred and the flooding that took place out there versus the older areas of town when they didn't have that. So we know that it has an impact. And from a water quality standpoint, it's a different story because they don't really account for that. So that's kind of the next phase of design engineering, I think.
Yeah, and right now, water quality, or actually measuring water quality, is not required by the city's permit. The state ADEQ does not require any kind of measurement, water monitoring or anything like that. But we do expect that's coming, and so there will be some requirements for testing of water quality. So we do, in the drainage manual, want to be set up for that, know what the water quality benefits are for different LID elements and how that works. So that essentially we can, when we do have to have the water quality piece as a regulatory side, we'll be able to, I say, just flip a switch and we'll be able to start using the manual as a regulatory authority for water quality as well. So we want to have those elements included in the manual. We just are not required to use them right now in a permit.
The other benefit from the LID manual is that I mean, there's a lot of interest in that type of design, but it's not really, everybody's doing it differently, and so this will provide a clear guideline. It's very predictable for the developers in the region. If they're coming into the community, they can look at the drainage criteria manual, know what our guys are doing as they're going through the review process, and so they'll be able to design to those criteria instead of just taking a crack at designing a rain garden, bringing some numbers forward and saying this is what it does, and then, you know, our engineers looking at it differently. It kind of puts everybody on the same page.
So they're not using it now just because it's outdated?
Well, they use the drainage criteria manual, but there's no LID component
okay,
right
that's what
now.
you're saying.
So,
yeah, and the drainage criteria manual doesn't have a way to address LIDs.
Right.
If somebody says, I'm putting in a rain garden, so I should be able to reduce my pipe size here because I'm keeping some of the water, we don't have any design criteria for
Right.
that
Gotcha.
rain garden. So
Right.
if we have that, then we can figure out how to adjust pipe sizes and so forth. And like I said, there are many things that are already required, you know, tree preservation areas and landscaping and all of that. It's already required as part of other landscaping requirements. With just some real minor modifications, you could turn those into rain gardens, and just a simple matter of learning how to model what kind of benefit a tree provides, and having criteria for that. That's what's exciting to me, is because people are already doing many of those things, and they're not really getting credit for them, so I think it's going to help in that way too.
That's great.
But if I may, the point of this particular discussion of this sort of place is that the land there is, so much of it is a natural rain garden. It's what you would model if you built a rain garden in a place that was different. It's absorbent soil. When you dig down deep, it's very deep. There are many hours of stormwater, many inches of water are held there. When it's totally dry, it takes a long time to start having significant runoff. The true peak flow would occur after hours and hours and days, and we had a couple of short spells in the last month or so, early this week. And if you noticed, if you live near someplace that is prone to flooding, you notice that at the beginning, the creeks don't rise very fast. And then after a while, after it's rained and rained, then another quarter inch or something comes. Suddenly it rises very rapidly. And having lived for now 17 years near a bridge that has had constant increases along upstream, the town branch of 11th Street between Duncan and Hill, we know how that process works, and you can see it. Most people's yards there are natural rain gardens. They don't have all the plants. They have the crawdads. It's not compressed. The crawdad, Ozark burrowing crawfish, in the yards, and they mow them down. Mow down the little chimneys, and occasionally you can catch one on the surface and photograph it, and everybody gets excited to see them because you can't see them in normal situations. But there's one piece of property that's affected by this runoff that has two kinds of crawfish on that property. And it's where the water comes off the, would be the northeast corner of the cell barn property and runs through a little ditch and a small culvert, I think it's just a round pipe, into a wooded wetland area that exists from Government all the way over to South Hill Avenue. And the water used to go through there and flow through into under Hill Avenue, Hill Avenue, and down into what's now the Hill Place apartment complex. And there was a wooded wetland over in there that had been left for decades without the trees being cut and cleared. So the people that were building the city back in the day did not build in a wetland area. They simply knew better. In Louisiana, we had to. South Louisiana, if you want to live on certain bayous, you build it up on stilts, because the floods are going to come down that far. Regardless, here they're flash floods, and they don't stand for very long. But at the corner, let's see if you're. So here's the running south. Here's the National Cemetery. Here's Government Avenue. Sale Barn comes down to right about here, and here's what used to be the old railroad that runs and then comes around through the co-op property and becomes the trail that goes up by the library. And so Spout Spring Branch comes down and it crosses this way and goes to Walker Park. The runoff from that part of the sale barn comes out a little ditch down at that corner, and this being the corner. And between those houses, it's ditched a little bit. Mostly it just spreads out in the woods. That's why people all the way up here have potential flooding, and over to that railroad right away, there's potential flooding. But the house that's on the corner, I've moved my map a little bit. The house that's on the corner anyway, by the little driveway, alleyway, that's next, would have been the road next to the old railroad. It not only has burrowing crayfish coming to the surface in the yard routinely over the years, see them there. In the subterranean area, there seems to be access to underground water, not the water the burrowing crawfish lives in. But these are little white crawfish, little probably blind crawfish, like the blind cavefish that are famous in our area. And once a fellow lived there a few years ago, invited me to come see those crawfish in the basement. You got to come when there's a big rain. And he pumped the water out. And the current residents, they're renters, may be doing the same thing if the pump still works, or maybe they're just looking up in the basement full of water. So 24 hours after one of these heavy rain occasions, I went over and said, well, you want to show them to me? And he said, yeah, well, I've been pumping it out for 24 hours. pump some water out on the surface. But I went down there anyway, and the water was less than knee deep by that point. And I walked around in there, and sure enough, here's this little white crawfish in there. Now, I've handled burrowing crawfish many times, but this was my first cave crawfish. And it was exactly what you see. And I foolishly let that one go. I picked it up briefly and put it down, but then I realized later it already lost one pincher before I saw it. I saw the pincher before I saw the crawfish. And it was the last one that had been pumped out. This has been 3 years ago. I should have taken it to the Nature Conservancy. I talked to them about it, and they had said, well, if you brought that pincher, we could have checked the DNA. Because they're actually studying these creatures in different streams in Arkansas, different systems in Arkansas, and they usually can find them not necessarily in the cave, but just at the mouth of the cave. Sometimes they find them.
So if
They
you're-
dig in there a little bit.
If you're seeing it in somebody's basement, then what's the, what is that a symptom or a sign of then?
That there is a cavern under the land, and that there's a pipe in there. So the reason there's access, I guess it was for a well, or maybe they attempt to drain by that or something in that basement. And so not only is there, since it's a basement in wetland, undoubtedly the walls allow some access, some water, but this water comes up out of that pipe, was the way it was described to me, and fills that basement when the underground streams in the area fill, just as the surface streams fill when there's heavy rain. And some of you are familiar with what went on some years ago at Cave Springs, Arkansas, when some of the developments up toward Rogers Bentonville were underway. They actually created an area that it was to protect Cave Springs Cave, and they did things we've never done here apparently, and that's put certain kinds of dye markers, some of you are professionals in this business, into the stream and upstream in various places where there are critical recharge areas, and find out how much of the area actually goes there, because it's not consistent with the surface water flow. It may vary in different ways. But
So you're saying that adds though to the water load, that's your concern, is
it adds to the critical significance of our building on this land and changing surface flows, and in particular, the foundations for 4-story buildings. They pretty much lock it off so you can't go in there. And usually during construction, one person from the city, you've got an inspector that goes, but most of the people working on the job, so there's not a magical camera telling you what they have to do out there. But I was told by contacts involved in the planning and development, various things. At Hill Place, they discovered, yes, they had to do extra work for foundation work there. And I never knew the nature of that. But what we do know was made more public about the county paying $1.5 million extra for foundation work for the courthouse parking deck. And that's probably analogous to the top of the sale barn property up next to the National Cemetery. So they're going to break bedrock or their pillars under there. If they stabilize these foundations, they're not going to slide on the surface of it. And I don't know that enough studies have been done to see. When the National Cemetery was built, you know, it's a beautiful mounded area. It looks like it's very likely a limestone dome, whereas out near the stream, in that part of town, you'll find the stream beds and how far you have to drill to hit the base of shale under the prairie areas that are adjacent. It's just about the same spot. You know, if you go out 50, 100, 300 feet maybe in those sunken wetland areas, the limestone's not near the surface there, but it's near the surface on these hills. And we don't know what we're going here, but you remember for the parking lot, parking deck at the courthouse, what went on 3 years, maybe 2.5 years of construction, was it? Anyway, it was torn up in '08 during the last federal election cycle, and voters had a good time getting in there for early voting and so forth, and paying their taxes for it. But anyhow, they ended up getting permission from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to go ahead and put these big pipes into that cavern to fill with concrete. Because this rumor is that, I don't know if you live here long enough, you've heard all these old timers talk about how what they had to do with the VA hospital and the old Washington Regional, which is near downtown at North Street. But the story was there that they hit a cavern and they just poured concrete till it filled up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very expensive. So the Fish and Wildlife Service allowed them to, without studying the potential life in the cavern beneath the courthouse, allowed them to fill so many of those pilings that they needed. And their excuse for not, the contractors, it hurt them on the money, and it cost the county more money also, us taxpayers. But they had drilled down to find bedrock and see how thick the red rock was. And as it turned out, there were lots of places, much of it, you went right on through the initial rock and you were down in this cavern. It was some 40 feet or something deep. But they had drilled on the periphery of the site. But out in the middle where they had to put the foundation, they didn't have one. So that's why it took a lot longer, it cost a lot more money. I think something like that occurred on the Hill Place property, but I had no proof of it because the information was sketchy during construction. They all but shoot at you if you want to get close and see what they're actually doing.
Well, Aubrey, we only have about 10 minutes left, sorry,
Yes,
and we need to get updates on a couple
Yeah,
other
okay.
things. And I
Thank
know, Susan, the local food guide, there have been several things going on, so do you want to tell us about those?
Sure. We put out our first edition. That's most exciting. That came out, we coordinated that with National Hunger Week and Feed Fayetteville, and we distributed it, I think, on the 22nd of October at the farmer's market. And not just at Fayetteville Farmers Market, but at the bigger farmers market in the Fort County region.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Sure.
And it was great. We've had a great reception. We just ended up with a 8-page brochure, 4 pages folded and stapled, printed on both sides. And we've got a website. And the brochure, the printing was donated. Very grateful for that. And
Who donated the printing?
the A&P Fayetteville.
Well, they deserve a little credit, that's why I'm saying,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Thank you. And
And who developed the website?
well, one of our members, Chad Cooper, is developing the website. It's very simple, and right now we had 1,000 copies printed, and we estimated that those would go very quickly. So we have the guide up, the PDF up on the website, so people can print it out.
Cool. And what's the URL?
What is the
for that?
website?
NWA Local Food Guide.org. And
Sorry, you said you had
1,000?
We had 1,000 printed, yeah, so we distributed them, we sort of estimated how many would go to each of the major farmers markets, and then for the smaller markets, we sent those off to at least have enough to distribute, for the market managers to distribute to the vendors. And then we put some in the Visitors Bureau, and we put some in the establishments that were listed in the guide, such as O&F. And we are in the process now of planning what's next. And vaguely, what's next is a bigger and better guide in spring 2012. So what we wanted to do was get the guide out now for the end of the market season, to get people thinking about it, to get people interested, and then over the winter we'll be gathering more interest, more information, more help, and putting together the next version.
Did all the 1,000 ones that you had printed, are those gone now? Did people...
Those are distributed, yeah.
Okay.
I think Teresa Maurer is the other co-facilitator. I think she may have a few left, but mostly they've been distributed.
Okay.
Yeah, but we're actually encouraging people to print off their own copies, or if any of the establishments still have them, to put out more copies, because really we just want to get the information out there.
How has it been received?
Wonderfully. Yeah, we've had a lot of very good response, a lot of excitement. And it was fun. I was at the market that day in the Fayetteville's farmers market, handing them out. And when people would walk by, I mean, certainly in Fayetteville, and especially the people who regularly frequent the market, it's a little bit preaching to the choir. They're not necessarily the folks who need the local food guide, but there are a lot of people there who, actually, it would be, I mean, our point is to reach, to bring together consumers and growers, and all the purveyors in between. And people walking by, even people from out of town, was exciting. Would you like one? They're like, yeah. I mean, that was generally, sometimes people were like, nah, thanks. But most people were like, oh yeah, thanks. And they'd start looking at it, and yeah, we've gotten great feedback.
It's just like whenever you drove through the Appalachian? Asheville, and saw that, so that's doing the same thing for somebody that's picking up ours.
And actually, it was interesting. I think there were a couple guys from Jonesboro who were visiting, and I ended up talking to them, and they wanted to take one back and share it with the folks there to do the same thing in that area. And so that's really nice. Growing it that way, which is very exciting.
Which is really what you wanted in the first place.
Which is,
I mean, it's so nice that if it kind of takes off on its own and does
exactly.
It's
exactly.
Did you hear from? Have you heard from the growers? I mean, the people that are they getting response? People calling them and saying they want to purchase?
I haven't heard personally yet.
Okay.
We, as soon as, or even before we had put the hard copy out, we had sent out on our email list the PDF, and even before the hard copy hit the street, we had some folks saying, count me in as a sponsor for the next one.
Nice.
So, yeah. We're going to be doing some networking over the next couple months, and just keep building it. The other thing, there was something else I was going to say. I am not remembering. Anyway, it's been very exciting.
Good.
And it's just, really step by step, okay, what do we need to do now? It's like, okay, so it's been good.
I had a question about the Ozarks at Large piece.
Oh, that's what I was gonna say. There was a newspaper article, another newspaper, we had one at the beginning. Remember, we had that interview, and then we had another newspaper article the day before it came out, and then we had an Ozark at Large piece, which I think is still up, so I'll send out that link.
Yeah.
It was a great interview. It really was good.
Yeah.
Kyle did a great job with it, and Teresa and I were there with him, and he interviewed us.
Yeah, I thought y'all did a really good job. It'd be cool to get that link on the
Oh, that's
webpage
great.
too.
That's a great idea. Thank you. Yeah.
On the city site or on the NWA
On the
NW Foods, and
I
what?
can post it too, but
Yeah.
it was at the page.
That's a great idea. Thank you, John. And the other thing, Swiss cheese brie. Anyway, at least it's local.
I like Swiss cheese.
I like Swiss cheese. Ozark cheese. Anyway,
Local.
it's been fun, and it just turned around in the last about 6 weeks before we put out the publication. I had come through Asheville again this summer, talked to the executive director of ASAP, the guide, the folks who do the guide that was so inspiring, and he said, yeah, but we started with 10 Xerox pages or whatever it was. And I came back and said that, and we're like, we can do that. So instead of trying to reach for the final product, we just said, okay, we can do that. And it came together, and it's a great start.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Have you talked at all with Case DeGario, who's the food director at Crystal Bridges? I know that he lives here in Fayetteville, I think, and they're going to be doing a lot of local food stuff there at Crystal Bridges too. And I had mentioned the food guide to him, and he's like, hey, whatever.
Okay.
We,
Great.
He's up for it.
I have not personally spoken with him, but yeah, we would definitely want to include that.
I'll try to shoot him a note.
So Terry, you put any wildlife habitat updates?
Yeah, I don't think I've told you all about this yet, but on September 23rd, we had a visit from a lady that she's the regional. What is her title? Anyway, she's our regional contact from National Wildlife Federation, and she came to tour around Fayetteville and kind of see what's going on. So I spent the day with her, and we had lunch with John and Sarah and Bob Koch from Fayetteville Natural Heritage Association and some others. But before we went to lunch, I took her to the 2 wastewater treatment plants because they're both big success stories and big habitat hubs that we've had certified, and showed her those. And then we went to Butterfield School, to the habitat garden there, and did some drive-bys and drive-throughs of some of our parks because it was already time to meet for lunch. But she was super impressed, and she's in Austin and was really excited about it, and just kind of reinforced what we already know, which is that we're gangbusters on everything. We just have to get those last homes. I mean, we're just sitting
Do you know
here.
where we are in our last home?
Yeah, we still need 60 more.
60
We still need 60 more homes, yeah. And I have the prepaid forms that Fayetteville Natural Heritage Association funded. I have had 3 requests for those, and what I do is folks email me that they want the free form, and I have a little packet that I put together with low-cost habitat tips and the native plant lists and things that have been created, and I don't know, brochures, some other stuff, and send it to them, and then they return their completed form to me, and I mail it to National Wildlife Federation. So there will be 3 more. I'm mailing them back all together. So there will be 3 more added to that. So that's kind of exciting. We got a little, and that came from Doug James doing an article in Arkansas Audubon to their newsletter. That's where all 3 of those came from. So we need more stuff like that, and that's really where I need to put my energy right now. And anyone else that wants to help out is just how can we get those last 60 homes. And so I'm still sitting holding 47 prepaid forms that won't cost anybody anything. We just need them to take the time to go check, 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 and here you go. And we'll mail them in for them. So I think we missed the boat on the farmer's market. Just sitting down there, and we had talked about doing that, and just didn't get that done in time.
Is this the last week, or?
Oh, it is? I thought it was
Yeah.
over.
19th is the last week.
Yeah, we
Oh, I
have
thought it was
another.
It's the 19th.
It's the weekend before Thanksgiving. Is the last one.
Oh, so we may have one more chance for that.
Well,
Okay.
2 more markets.
2 more markets.
And
Okay.
let me, this relates to what she was talking about before. Is there a winter market that's down near the old bus, or in the old bus station site?
Yeah, Wren's Winter
That's
Market.
something to talk about
Oh, there is? Oh.
later. here,
Okay.
but-
Well, we had said that might be, in that case, we'd have the prepaid forms there and be asking people, giving them information, and they would sit there and fill it out. Not walk off with it, but fill it out while they're there and leave it with us. And that may generate a lot of new certifications, or it may not, I don't know. But we just need more effort put into getting those last 60. And so another good little outcome, though, that I'll tell you about is the Butterfield Habitat Garden that we did. You know, the news team was there, and it was in the paper. And I got a phone call from a guy in Eureka Springs who's an arborist. He's a tree guy, and he's has been kind of frustrated with, so he's tried to kind of get certain things going like Fayetteville has going in Eureka Springs. And so I ended up on the phone with him for like an hour and a half. What he was interested in is he's working with this school to redesign their play area, their outdoor space, and he saw that on TV and he wants to incorporate Habitat Garden for that school. So we talked a lot about that. So then we got into, you know, he was asking what's the Environmental Action Committee, and he was just so impressed that Fayetteville has a tree and landscape committee and a, you know, Environmental Action Committee, and that the streamside ordinance and the tree ordinance. So I actually ended up, he was asking so many questions I couldn't answer. I sent him to Sarah Lewis. I call Sarah, you guys need to talk about how to do this. But that led to, I told him you just need to, you know, find some good partner groups in Eureka that would be willing to help make that happen at the school. So he went to their garden club, which, you know, different cities have garden clubs that have been around, some of them for 100 years, you know, and it's mostly senior citizens that meet once a week and do gardening projects. And so I got a call then from the lady who's the president of the Eureka Springs Garden Club, who said, we happen to be coming to the Botanical Garden for a tour, and we'd like to stop by Butterfield because they're thinking about putting the money.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, they want to see what that's all about because they want to help make this happen. And I don't even know actually the name of the school in Eureka Springs, but so they came, 2 vanfuls of these sweet little ladies, and it was the day it was pouring down rain a week or so ago, or I don't know. And they came anyway. They were all in their little rain hats and everything, and we walked out and looked at everything and talked about it and gave them a bunch of information. So that's kind of neat. There might be, yeah.
I know somebody who might, in Eureka, who I think would be somebody really helpful to hook up with. Yeah.
Send me their name and I'll pass it on to this guy. Yeah.
I might know somebody.
Do we get credit for that with the community, for those like points or something like that? If they're like a sister city or
Oh, I don't know.
help set up
You probably
something?
could. There's sort of this open category where, you know, they don't necessarily have everything listed that you could get. Sort of like, ask us if that's worth points and we'll tell you, you know, and it usually is. So, yeah, what I find, those type of points seem to just come easily for us and our group and everything in Fayetteville. It's just the hurdle of getting homeowners to fill out that form and send it in.
It seems like we've taken away all potential barriers, though. I mean, if you've got, I'll give you the form.
Yeah, I need to
pay
get that
for
word
it.
out better. I just need to get the word out better again, you know. And whatever newsletters for specific conservation groups or any interested, you know, not even conservation, just any groups, you know, Rotary.
Yeah.
Fayetteville Council of Neighborhoods, perhaps?
Yeah. Yeah,
It's an organization that meets on the last Thursday, and we meet at, what is it, 6:30, Aubrey? Is it 6:30 in the meeting room upstairs?
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock, and I'll just tell you that a member of this group is the new chairman.
And he's over there talking.
Oh, you are?
Oh,
Yeah.
good.
Oh, good.
And
So how many people are you having show up these days? Because we've kind of
Well,
come at this before and it didn't really.
I think it's probably regenerating. I think it's
Okay,
going to
good.
start becoming something fresh, and
Okay.
I'm hoping that you guys will have some input to it. It looks like that the map of Fayetteville has lots of places that are organized as neighborhoods.
Right.
And I think that plenty of people have issues to discuss. And from what I've read about this organization. It's called a First Forum. So the idea of a First Forum, I'm trying to explore what the viewership is. I don't really know how to do that. I don't know how to find out who's out there, who the stakeholders are, but likely you guys are some of those people, or know people who are. So we need to find out how we behave as a forum. It's kind of an interesting challenge. Is it video medium? Is it electronic, or is there a paper aspect to it? Can people get connected by writing a letter or making a phone call? So I'm hoping that some people will come forward with something to say, and that we can start being a forum.
Well, whenever you feel like it's a good month for me to come to that meeting and pitch it, I'd be happy to. Just let me know.
Anytime.
Okay.
Last Thursday, 6 o'clock,
The last Thursday of the month at 6
Yeah.
o'clock. Okay.
in the meeting room upstairs.
Okay.
Was it 300 something?
Well, I'll get with you on that maybe then and come in.
I have a question.
I'm anxious to see what this is going to be, kind of start fleshing out as. Because likely there's lots and lots of people who have things to say, but I don't know who they are, where they are.
But
Any
that
other committee?
discussion of the date for the next meeting, the combined meeting, I think Julie has a date. I don't know if she's got to talk to you about it.
You guys acquainted with Julie McQuaid? Yeah, she's,
Okay, so maybe we can get with somebody, our expert, to come to Council of Neighborhoods and talk about it at
Okay.
that next meeting.
Local foods too.
Yeah.
I say anything we do, we can just
Yeah, sure.
let them know,
well,
because that's.
aren't we all looking for our brothers and sisters out there that are interested in what we're interested in, right?
That's
Any other last updates, any other committees, projects I skipped?
One announcement, press release went out today, but the city's collecting 3 through 7 plastics.
I saw, oh,
Yeah.
yeah, and
It's
yeah,
down at the
explain
drop-off
that.
center.
But not
initially.
in the,
Not in
the
the
collection.
residential bin yet, but
Any idea on a timeline for that?
for the
Next year?
residential bin, they haven't set a timeline yet. There's a new broker or buyer of the product that's over in Oklahoma, and so we're transitioning, but the first step was to just collect them down there at the drop-off center.
Did you
So
have
the
any-
drop-off centers for recycling are where?
There's only one right now. There's
Still the one
one
at
that's
Happy Hall.
under design and about to construct, but the one down at Happy Hall.
Happy Hall, and we'll take number 3 through 7 plastics,
Mhm.
all in one place, and it gets sorted later, or do
Yep.
we sort them
It's
ourselves?
all in one place. There's one bin. There's an additional bin now down there at the drop-off center. You're familiar
Okay.
with that. And it's 3 through 7.
So all you have to do is put a big trash can in your garage, and when it's
Yeah.
full, take it down there and.
Yep.
And
I'm
so there's
excited.
1 and 2 is still gonna be in a separate bin, and 3 through 7, can you tell us what some examples of that are?
That is a great question.
It sounds like everything else, is that like
Yeah.
like butter
Yogurt,
containers?
sour
Yogurt
cream
containers.
stuff, they're often 5s, it seems like.
Yeah, the yogurt container is the most popular one. The flimsy or containers, like
Yeah.
the butter containers,
Sour cream.
those types of things.
Yeah.
So like, okay.
What about your glass? Have you had some ideas going?
We've been talking with a group out of Kansas City. We still collect all 3 types of glass, so it won't be an expansion. It just allow us to commingle all the colors, and it gives us more flexibility operationally. But we're actually pretty familiar with the group.
Okay.
That's great.
That's great.
What about the apartment recycling pilot?
It launched, so the Cliffs and North Creek side right now have recycling. We're getting an approved rate through City Council so we can begin aggressively pursuing others, but those were the first 2.
How's it going there?
It's slow in the beginning just because we didn't time our education. There's a lot of education in kind of getting the word out and making sure everyone's aware. So we've been doing door hangers, and we've got a person that has been out there at the Cliffs and North Creek side Cliff's a little more difficult because they don't have like an email listserv or anything, so it's individual, you know, talking with each individual. North Creekside can send out an email blast, but they're quite a bit smaller, so. But the opportunity for the Cliffs, it's every Monday. There's these 3 bins show up, and it'll stay for 24 hours, and then it goes over to North Creekside, which is over on Garland. Leverett, yeah, it's Leverett.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Anything else? Okay, I don't think we usually have to adjourn, right?
Question, one thing about Habitat, you've got 40-something free ones,
47 left.
47, and we
Yes.
need 50,
60.
60 more people.
Yep.
But do people have to meet a requirement? Or we're not asking their income. If they come in and say they'll do it, if
Exactly,
they
exactly.
have it
If they
free.
ask for one, they can have one.
Because we want to get them on board and
Yes,
as examples to everyone
Yeah.
else. And
Yeah.
So please,
yes.
thank you.
Good question. Yep.
Great. Well, thanks everybody. I think we have interesting things going on. So we'll see you in a month.
Thanks, Andy.
Thanks.